there is. There is on the. Isn't that wonderful? Oh yeah, I read those. I should do those back to you. Oh, you can't. Can't see any of the faces. But I have place. I think people are looking at their watches. Yeah, like, so anyway, with the Battle of the Republic that they put words to. Really, really. I hope you'll let me on. I will do it. Oh, wonderful.
Well, in behalf of the board, we welcome all of you here today, and this is our 40th History Talk.
Oh my goodness.
So we're very honored to have with us Cammie Conlon, whom some of you know as being a star performer in Gone with the Wind. And and some of you know her from all her years at the Chamber of Commerce, and some of you know her from Little River Inn. But today she is here to talk about Kelley House and its beginnings, because Cammie was the first director, and it goes back to the early days before Kelley House looked like it looks today. Certainly, she was here with Beth and Dorothy, who were the founders, and she was hired to take over so they could accomplish what they had wanted to do, and that was to preserve Mendocino for future generations. So we're very honored to have you here today, Cammie. And Channel 3 is your videotaping. And after the broadcast, then those DVDs will be available for purchase. So we're very happy that you're here too, Julia.
No, I didn't tell you that.
So, anyway, we give you Cammie. And thank you very much for being here today. And we continue these on the fourth Sunday of each month through October. So we hope that you come back for the future ones. And next month will be Tom Ugrin talking about earlier days of Fort Bragg. So I hope you come back at that time. So Cammie, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dee. Well, Dee was certainly around when I got here in 1980. I don't know why I thought it would be so easy to just talk about what it was like between 80 and 83 when I was here. Well, my age makes it just a little, had to do a lot of looking back and a lot of calling people. Do you remember? So thank God for Beth Stebbins and her wonderful newsletter. She kept us up to date on what was going on. I will say this, the house, it looked a lot like it does now inside. The gardens, of course, they weren't even beginning to be gardens. You were just lucky to keep the lawn maintained. But from 78 to 80, they had spent on restoring the downstairs. So the wallpaper was up, the display cases are different. But it was basically, it looked the same. And in my memory, I was thinking the kitchen looked the same. But then when I went and saw those beautiful cabinets, and if you haven't noticed what's been done to the microwave, do take a look. It's really world class. So those cabinets were all, since my time, we had a sink and that was it. Well, how I got here, like most things in my life, it wasn't carefully planned out, researched, or soundly, measured. I just had to get out of Los Angeles, where I'd been born and raised, lived all my life. So I was fleeing, and I wanted to come up here, and the only person I knew in Mendocino was Chatter Bischoff. Well, for those of you who know Chatter, if you know Chatter, you don't really need to know too many more people. So she got me a sublet of Glenn Ricard's apartment above Circa. Can you imagine? Brand new. And before she arranged to talk to Jack, her husband, who was on the board, to see about getting me a job here. I arrived from Los Angeles with my 2 teenage kids, and I'm driving my mother's old Cadillac sedan. Remember the big old Bromes? The biggest, it was like being in your living room. My kids called it the Queen Mary. So I parked the car and across the street from Circa, and we're emptying our things out. We're getting the stuff out of the trunk, and we're making several trips back and forth up the stairs. Meanwhile, next door to Circa at that time was Alfonso's. And it was probably beginning a head shop during the 60s days, but it was now a cigar store, and you could buy single cigarettes. And he had an incredible music collection, and he played music, so Alfonso's. And then there was this writer, Chester Anderson, who was sitting on the stoop in front of Alfonso's watching the parade back and forth. And on my last trip up the stairs, he said, "I was waiting for the barbecue." He had us in Southern California, he had us nailed. So, having lived all my life in Los Angeles, I didn't realize how different it would be to be in a small town. During the summer, I might introduce myself to someone in the hardware, Mendoza, and he'd say, "Oh yeah, you're the lady up in Glenn Ricard's place," or "Yeah, you're the lady with the big Cadillac." Yeah, so you realize a small town, what's going on. So I was just lucky to get to be the first director here, summer of 1980. Turned out to be quite a momentous year as I look back. I read later that Beth Stebbins said I was hired for fundraising, which I knew, and I had experience in that. And we got to work immediately on that. Also, as long as I was here, I might as well be kind of minding the house. And we established regular visitor hours during that time. I think it was weekends, 1 to 4. We had a little donation box. My office was upstairs in that first bedroom, and I had a typewriter. I don't even think we had an electric typewriter in those days. Remember carbon paper and all those fun things? And I always made a lot of mistakes, so I had the erasure thing and a lot of that stuff on hand. We had the telephone downstairs in the library. And I'm amazed that I was so limber those days. It was no problem to run up and down those tricky stairs. I hadn't yet had my, I did break my leg while I worked here. And I remember being in the big cast and on crutches and getting stuck one day out on the porch. For some reason I had sat down to do something, and then I couldn't get up, and there was nobody around. And I thought, what if I die here on the porch in Kelley House? No one will ever know. So up and down, they had done an appeal for funds. We were in a disaster situation, an emergency situation. Those are Beth Stebbins' words. And they had sent an appeal to the membership, and 39% of the members responded for a total of $4,000. Well, in fundraising parlance, that's fabulous. I mean, how much per 39 people to get 4,000 and to get a 30, but it wasn't anywhere near the money that they needed. So Beth suggested we call Supervisor Norm Duvall. And you remember him? And I remember he came, and we met right out in the garden, and he was very supportive and very helpful. And he suggested that we appear before the Board of Supervisors and ask for funding. I read that Beth said a partnership, that we want some sort of partnership with the county, which eludes me. But I wish Gwen Jacobson was here. She drove me, and we sat in the hearing room, and I was on the agenda after. Won't you come in and sit down, Chris?
I guess I
Yeah.
I don't think anybody else is.
Kelley House was on the agenda after the blind people, the disabled, you know what I mean, the people that have the Paul Bunyan shop. Maybe the cancer, we didn't have a cancer. All of the health services, the most needy, weeping, sad, crying people were up before me. And then I get up to say, well, the importance of maintaining history, saving history for the Mendocino culture. Yeah. And Glenn said to this day, she was just embarrassed for me. At any rate, we did get a $1,200 line item, so that was saying something, that was quite a bit. So given our circumstances financially, we had the first silent auction, 1980. And I think we combined it with a yard sale. And as I recall, people brought their garage sale, that sort of stuff over there. And we had the nicer items over here. And Beth suggested that I call Paul Katzeff at Thanksgiving Coffee to see if he'd donate coffee, which we hadn't had done before. And he came personally, brought all his hot pots, and I remember, and lots of coffee, and he said, I will donate all this to you if you promise to keep the pots fresh, don't let the coffee stand too long. So that was the beginning of my education about fine coffee. I think I'd been a Folgers girl up until then. Okay, so here we are, we've got the standard hours of effort. Oh, I was supposed to recruit more docents. That never changes, does it, Nancy? Art Lemus, who was related to two people right in this room, Dee and Jack Lemus, he was very much around and very generous of his time and interested in keeping the history. And he was a great one to schmooze the visitors, and he knew all the history as the Lemus family does. Well, since I had to sometimes be a docent, can you believe or imagine the crash course in history that I needed? Oh my Lord. And I'd get stumped, people would ask me, I'd look around to see if anybody would know what I'm saying. Oh my goodness, but I did learn. And how wonderful. And we started applying for grants, and we had a little drab here and a little drab there, and we were strengthening the membership, I think. And we finally, it might have been into 81, we got a $9,000 grant from the James Irvine Foundation, and that was for a computer. And Beth had said, in giving me the wording for a computer, that she envisioned that there would be a system of memory banks where docents could go and retrieve the history of the area. A computer and memory banks. How far we have come. I know Beth must be looking down and thinking she never could have envisioned the setup that we now have in the research arm of Kelley House. She was, Beth and Dorothy, do you know a little about them? Nothing about them? Oh, they were two single ladies that arrived here from Palm Springs in the 70s. Not hippies, but they were. Beth was a photographer that was her hobby. She liked photography, and she got into history, and she was in photographing the houses in the area and the buildings. She got fascinated by the history, and it happened that while she was doing that, there was a visitor, a very famous man from Washington, D.C., who was in China, Wallace, I've got it wrong. Anyway, he encouraged her to start documenting history. And so she, a stranger as I had been to the village, she and Dorothy, who was her great assistant and just a fine researcher in her own right. They began compiling the history of all the families and all the buildings here, and she had it on 3x5 cards in those card file boxes, boxes and boxes and boxes. And I even remember hearing her say she was terrified of fire. Not only for her cards and her research, but we were beginning to get clothing and some other kinds of you know, things that a museum has. And she was very frightened about that. Beth was a strong woman. I mean, I was terrified of her for a while. She intimidated me. Dorothy was much softer and kind, you know, sweeter, easier to be around. But once you proved to Beth that you could toe the line, she was all for you. And she just, I mean, they just did an amazing job. Who could believe it? Who could believe that two ladies would start what we have now? Okay, so let's move on to 1981. Are you bored yet?
No.
Are we okay? All right.
We're good for the next
Now,
3 weeks.
I will tell you, we'll have to insert a little bit of film into this. This same year, somewhere, I don't know how, around getting things ready for the silent auction or what, I was contacted because Good Morning America was going to have a week-long salute to David O. Selznick. And one day of each program, they would devote to one of his movies. So Tuesday or something was the Gone with the Wind day. And they had people they were gonna talk to in Los Angeles and people in New York. And they wanted to talk to me, and they could pick me up in San Francisco if I could get down to the ABC station there. So I was gone overnight, and I did my taping, and then I didn't get to see the show till I got back to the hotel, and I could hear and see everybody. And the plan was that the very last person would be Butterfly McQueen. Prissy, she was in New York. So she was gonna be the, you know, pièce de résistance indeed. So after they talked to me and Ann Rutherford, people were going back and forth, they talked to Mary Anderson. She was the one right before Butterfly. And how many of you know Mary Anderson? She had a smaller part than I had. She was Maybelle Merriweather. Well, they got to talking to Mary Anderson, and she would not shut up. David Hartman was the host, and she just went on. I mean, he just couldn't. So that meant that they had to shove Prissy over to, I think, the Since You Went Away day or something. It was just kind of a bizarre, funny thing. So I get back here, and I'm sitting at the telephone in the library, and the museum is open, but there's nobody here. There's just one man looking at the books. And Dorothy calls me and says, well, wasn't that funny about Good Morning America? And I say, wasn't that the worst? And she was just so boring, and who cares? Nobody knows about it. And she went on and on, blah, blah, blah. So when I finished that little speech, I hang up the phone, and the man who was looking at the book said, I'm Mary's neighbor. I drove her to the studio. What are the chances of that happening? Well, should have learned my lesson there. Oh, dear. I wish that I knew the other grants that came in, not as many as we had hoped. I know I sent out a lot more applications than we got responses. One thing that I did that I think was successful for the membership and the constituency and the people we wanted to draw into our family was I made a point of writing a very personal thank you note, and I really kept that up. And I have found that donors so appreciate just being acknowledged personally. And now everybody's twittering, I suppose. I don't know. It's different, even email, but that's something that I recommend that was successful. Sally Lose was the president of the board of directors during my tenure. And she is the one who created the 4th of July Ice Cream Social. She was from Ohio, and she remembered, though in smaller towns, you know, what fun it was on the 4th to have an ice cream social. And it seems so fitting for Kelley House. So that is where we got the ice cream social. Sally also was concerned forever about the lack of water in our pond. We had so many drought years, and then the geese would come. And so Sally saw that there were rubber tubs that they put out into the dry pond for the food. And then Pat Scott, whose family I just heard paid for the restoration of the piano, she built a little kind of an ark, some sort of little, that the goslings could go into. She still has it. And she says it kind of looks like the Kelley House, so it would all sort of blend in. I thought that was funny. So here's Sally concerned about the drought and everything. And after she died during a terrific drought. And after she died, 2 days later, we had the heaviest rains we'd had in years and years and years. And Pat says she thought that was a nice touch for Sally. Okay, now we're into 81. Beth had worried that nobody was gonna step up to do the reviews or to do the newsletters. But by 81, they were being published quarterly, and the walking tours started. And they're still going on. Do you think that's nice? I did talk to a friend of mine in Los Angeles. She was a Stanford graduate. Pardon me, you know how they are. Anyhow, when she heard I was leading historic walking tours, she went into paroxysms of laughter. She says, that I'll have to see. Let's see, in 82, dues were $10. The first cemetery cleanup was started by Dorothy. This was by now the 3rd annual silent auction, and Evelyn Abernathy wrote, she was trying to get people interested in it. I thought what she wrote, I should have made sure she came. Okay, we need you. If you've just given away the Steinway to the Paul Bunyan store and can't find anything to send to the auction, consider a donation of services. How about, is Sally Howell the only one who'll dust out the spare room and offer it for a night in an authentic Mendocino house? You know, anniversary ceremony. Just a lot of great ideas here. I might save them for you. This is really. Wow. So that was the 3rd annual. It was getting to be just a, you know, an established thing. By 1983, I was the newsletter editor, and I had instigated a donation form on the back, which we hadn't had before. Money, of course, is always a problem here, you know. The Main Street fence was replaced, and the materials were donated by GP, and we had a $1,500 grant from Rotary that went along with it. Now, in 1983, Tony Lemus, Jack Lemus's wife, our Mendocino Coast Film Coordinator, asked the board, or got permission. She wanted to have a gathering here in the living room because they were going to film a movie right in the village of Mendocino, and that movie was Racing with the Moon. And I remember so well Tony being here with the director Richard Benjamin, who had not heretofore directed movies. And we didn't really know the cast, you know, there's a lot of young people you never heard of. Someone named Sean Penn, you know, someone named Nicolas Cage, yeah, you know. But anyway, we didn't get all too excited. But Tony, laid out the plans, and they were gonna shoot most of the village. And so from there, we segue, I signed up to be an extra, and that was just lots of fun. There was a trailer parked near Crown Hall, I think, where we went in and we tried on these costumes. It was so professional. I mean, everybody knew what they were doing, you know? I mean, that was helping us out. So the day that I was in, we were walking back and forth down near Circa. I never made it into the movie, I'm sorry to tell you. But we did that. We walked up, down, back and forth for many, many hours. And then we got a lunch break. And we had lunch catered in Crown Hall. And I was sitting near these two young thugs who were in the movie, they Sean Penn and Nicolas Cage. I mean, they were like little hoods, you know, and they had their feet up on the table, and they were smoking, they were tough, and I thought, oh, brother. Hollywood's really slipped. And there was a beautiful young girl in it whose name escapes me, but it's so much fun to see that movie again. I remember there's a scene of Sean Penn coming out of the corner building, now what was it supposed to be? No, up on Main Street. Well, who cares, anyway.
Was the
Yeah.
drugstore, wasn't it?
Well, I don't think we got the name the X-Lax building until summer of '42. And that was later, I think. I think Jack's nodding.
Yes.
Yeah, summer of '42 was later. I also remember during the filming where the Golden Goose was a clock shop, and Mrs. Dostal owned it. She came out of the clock shop and ceased filming. And so everything shut down. Yes, I know, it never changes. And they called for Supervisor Norm Duvall. And he came over, and I just remember seeing him standing there talking to Richard Benjamin, the cameraman, Mrs. Dostal, and I don't know all what had, but not long after that, she sold the shop. She sold it, yeah, and moved on. So let's see, that was the movie. I had to move on. I think we'd reached a standstill. I certainly wasn't bringing in enough money, probably to pay for my salary, and I needed more money. I just couldn't survive. Oh, I meant to tell you, the apartment where your offices are, it was an apartment lived in by a number of people. When I was here, Bonnie, whose last name I can't tell you, and her husband lived there. Bonnie works for Dr. Berenson, if any of you know her. And then as I was leaving in '83, they hired Dan as the director. Dan, who went on to be the director of the Willits Museum. And Dan Taylor, of course. And he lived, or is that, no, that sounds like a guy at the Press Democrat. No? Oh, same one, okay. So they really went up a notch with him, because he was so solid and knowledgeable in the history field. And so that is my years with Kelley House. What a sweet memory. It was so much fun going back and thinking back. You know, when things are going on, you never, I mean, that's it. You do this and you did that and you do that. When you look back, they just really got a pig in the poke with me. You know, it's amazing. It's just amazing that it worked out, and it did. It's certainly, I mean, I didn't have any doubt in the world I'd be one, but I can see, I feel, what? And it did work out. It was just a wonderful, wonderful time. If any of you have memories of that time, would you tell me? Speak up. Mildred was here. Mildred was here. Excuse me for not. Yes.
See that gold fabric that's behind that screen on the piano? Well, Dorothy Bear got a hold of me because she knew I did sewing. And she said, here's some fabric. I want you to put that behind that screen. And it was kind of sleazy material, but it's still there.
And people comment on how beautiful it is there. What year was that?
About 80, I guess. Uh-huh.
Do you remember Martha Wagner?
Oh, good.
All the, a lot of,
My best friend.
oh, yeah. So much of the gardening she started, yeah. And photography.
Yeah, well, Bill
Or
was
was
a
it her husband, or
photographer.
Bill was the photographer, yeah. Dee, who else was around that,
Well, Martha's still here, she's still supervising the garden.
you don't mean it?
Yes,
I didn't know
and
that.
me.
Yes.
Oh, and supervising it, well, that's right, yes, I should think so.
trouble.
I should think so, yes, that's so sweet, isn't that great? I so wanted Chatter to be here, but she couldn't get, she says she couldn't get through the doors.
I talked with her this morning.
Oh, did you?
Yes, and, you know, for all her health problems, she is always up when you talk with her.
She's just absolutely amazing, I know this is true, yeah,
And,
She's
yeah.
essentially bedridden, but,
yeah.
But I'm going to see her on the 6th of July and show her some of the pictures that I've just gotten of Mendocino from 1908 to 1916.
Oh my, what fun.
Yes. it's
How
just
did you
amazing.
come to buy those?
Well, it was, I didn't buy them.
I know,
It was
come buy
a
them,
gift
yeah.
of the granddaughters of the pastor that was here
Oh
from
my.
during that period of time, and he was a photographer.
Wow.
And their mother kept everything, all the letters.
Oh.
I mean, you know, Mendocino going dry in 1909.
Wow.
And with a parade with Reverend Fisher leading the way, and they're singing Battleship of the Republic to the word, with their words of
they were saying Mendocino's going
going
dry.
dry to
To
Battleship.
the tune of the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
How did you know that?
Well, I'm her husband.
Oh, for
okay?
God's
She won't sit with me, but other than that,
But we have the words and everything,
yeah,
and a
we
picture.
can sing it for you.
Sure.
Well, we won't.
Oh,
I mean, it's just an amazing gift that just came out of the blue because of a connection of the Marshalls, because the pastor's daughter was friends with Catherine and Carrie Marshall, and we made the connection, and they had kept all these photographs and albums, and
Letters.
Letters.
Everything.
and if we could read his handwriting better, we could know more.
There's always that, yeah.
But it's just amazing.
The
Linda.
ball.
I have a question. What do you remember and how much did you have to do with all the things that were coming in that are now in the vault, the documents and artifacts and things? Was that all Dorothy and Beth, or were you?
Beth had resigned from the board, 80, when I came. She thought that she'd like to have more time to, you know, be doing all the research. So she would have been, she or Dorothy would have been personally on top of all the things that came in, you know. I would have called them if somebody, and I don't remember anybody, you know, too many great donations. I remember that was the first time I met Susan McKinney, who owns Little River Inn. She had just come back to help her parents run the inn, and she had some things donated.
So do you think that most of the artifacts came in after your time?
Uh-huh. Or before, I mean, it just wasn't something that I was,
Yeah.
you know, aware of. I can't remember any specific thing. And it seems if I wrapped them or put them, I don't even know how they're put away, you know, which shows how little I know. Are they not cataloged very well?
Oh, no, they're cataloged,
Oh.
but, you know, sometimes we have records of who donated them, but I just wonder,
Not
was there
where.
any drive going on to contact old families, or did things just start pouring in when?
I think Beth had done a great deal of that, of soliciting, you know, saying we're open here, we're ready for anything, for sure. Jack, you have some memories.
Well, I do have a few, yes.
Please,
You
come.
mentioned our oldest brother, Art,
Yes.
who was on the original board of directors.
Yes.
And I can remember, after I had retired, he contacted me within a year or so, and he said, now I'm getting to the age where I'm not gonna be able to contribute to the Kelley House as much as I have been in the past, and he said, I'd like to have you consider replacing me. He said, we should keep a Lemus on that board because we've been here for 150 years, some members of our family. So I was on the board for a number of years, and some of the ones you mentioned who was on that board at that time was Jack Bischoff,
Yes.
and he was on the board for several years before I was, and some years after that. So then after a number of years, and we're talking now about the early 80s and the late 80s, I decided I have enough other interests that I'm going to have to give up this board membership. And so someone said, well, do you have anyone in mind that you would recommend that could replace you? And I said, yes, I do. She's very active in the board now. So he followed me. So we've always had a Lemus on the board. Maybe that's not as good as it sounds, but.
And when did the Lemus Library get named?
Well,
When
yeah,
did
we
name-
appreciate that they did to our family.
Yeah, there's so.
But I can go back to a number of years in the past, when I was a kid, not even in grammar school. My brother and I, my younger brother, we used to come over to this house about once a week because our mother and the lady that lived here, her name was Emily Terrell, and her husband had the garage next door here, and they rented it from Mrs. McCollum. They never owned this house. And Mrs. Terrell would come over to our house, which was right across the street, where the Mendocino Cafe is now.
Yeah,
That's where 10 of us were born in that house.
that's something.
And anyway, Mrs. Terrell would come over to our house, and then the next week, my mother would come over here, and we'd, they would talk for a couple hours, and then we'd walk over back. And the odd thing about it, they were a very close friend, but they always called each other Mrs. Lemus and Mrs. Terrell. And she did that with a lot of other people too. In those days, they did that.
Yeah.
So,
So the
yes.
house on the outside, I'm sure, looked the same. Was it very different inside? It must have been.
Yes, it is.
Sure, it
Yes.
has to be, because you would
Right.
think, yeah.
But it's.
Now, I remember that 10 of you were born in that building. Was there also a barber shop there?
The barber shop is in the front of the building that faced on Lansing Street. My father and my oldest brother were dark barbers there, and then Art, he was the barber with my
Yeah,
father.
okay.
And in those days, you didn't have to go to barber school.
Oh,
You could just have another
Yeah,
barber
sure.
training, yes.
Yeah.
And then during the Depression, the business was so slow that he moved down to the Bay Area in San Mateo County.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was different. I can remember when we were little kids, we used to play football out on Lansing Street. It wasn't paved. I'm talking about the late 20s and early 30s. And once in a while, you'd see a car come by, maybe about 3 people in town had a car, and you'd have to get to the side and they'd go by.
Yeah, 3 people. Oh, you're pretty safe. Well, it's quite an amazing little town, isn't it? Yeah.
There was another story about Mrs. Dosto. She started another enterprise, you know.
Oh, what was that?
A laundrette.
Oh, she did?
And it was where, where the,
Oh,
Shop.
I went to that laundrette.
remember that? Well, so it was really a gift to the town, everybody. We didn't
Yeah.
have a laundrette.
And that was Mrs. Dostal?
Mrs. Dosto started, but she,
Shame on me.
and, you know, people would come in from the woods, I guess, some of the hippies would come in and, you know, and wash everything they had, including the clothes they were wearing. And she became so upset she closed down.
Where did she have the laundrette?
Where?
Is it where Zoe's is?
No.
Further.
No, right on Albion Street,
Compass Rose.
Compass Road.
Compass Road, okay.
That's where the laundrette was.
No, I don't remember that. There was one then later when I came back in '89, yeah.
That's where Zoe's.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
it.
no, I don't remember. So there was one down there. Oh.
For a little while.
Well, I bet you'd like, may I turn it over to Nancy? Did you have some announcements, questions? No.
No, we just want to thank you, Cammie, for a wonderful
Thank you.
afternoon. There'll be refreshments in the kitchen afterward, but Nancy has some
Yes.
announcements to make.
Thank you very much.
Thank
This
you.
is wonderful. So thank you all for coming, and as Cammie mentioned, docents are always an issue here after 30 years. And so, unfortunately, we have not been able to switch to summer hours in the museum because we don't have enough docents to keep the museum open. So, if you folks have any interest at all in working a shift, it's 1 day a month, 4 hours a day. And or if you know someone who might be interested, ask your friends, spread the word. And we'd love to have you, and we do all the training and provide everything you need. So we'd love to have you be docents. And it's a lot of fun, as Judith can attest to, and
It's
Dean,
really
we have a
neat.
lot of fun here. So, and we also need help for 4th of July. So if anybody wants to work a shift, if you're gonna be down here for the parade anyway, we could really use some help on 4th of July with our barbecue. And we have lots of things. You don't have to handle money. You can sit next to the ice cream if you want, or the beer, and we'd love to have some extra hands, so again.
Free samples.
Yes, you do get a free lunch, yes, and a beer after your shift, so, yeah. So thank you very much, and
Thanks.
it was great, Cammie,
Nancy,
thanks.
thank you. And I did bring this, and forgot to mention it, Ann Foote was a local artist who did serigraphs, and this is one of the Kelley House. And she donated this to Kelley House so that Kelley House could sell them. And then Lee Burleson did framing, and as I recall, she donated the framing so that people could buy this. And this is all the old typewriter written down from Kelley House. It's very sweet. So you're welcome to look at it. But I'm taking it back home. Well, maybe not. They asked if it was a donation. It could be a donation.
Remember why they did not have a parade that year? This is a history mystery.
Yeah.
Well, that
Yeah, I do.